Welcome to Magnify with Sue, the podcast for people who've done everything they were told and still feel something's missing. I'm Sue Paulson. Every week, we look at what it takes to move from self-doubt to self-love, from fear to inner peace, from striving to be enough to remembering you already are. Because the truth is, you came in magnificent. The essence of you isn't out there. It's right here in your own heart. So let's go find it. Let's magnify.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode on the podcast, and I'm your host, Abraham. Life has a way of testing us, sometimes through failure, sometimes through loss, and sometimes through experiences so painful that they force us to question everything we thought we knew about ourselves. But what if the hardest moments of our life were not punishment? What if they were invitation to grow, to heal, and to discover a version of ourselves we never knew existed? Welcome to 95 Exit Plan, a podcast where we explore entrepreneurship, personal growth, resilience, and the mindset required to create a life of purpose and freedom. Today's conversation is about adversity, transformation, self-discovery, and what it truly means to embrace your own magnificence. My wonderful guest for today is Sue Paulson, personal best-selling author, speaker, and magnificent mentor. After experiencing two divorce, two bankruptcy, failed businesses, a near-death experience, and two battle with cancer, Sue transformed life greatest challenges into a powerful journey of growth, healing, and self-discovery. She's the author of Magnificent Misery and the Healing Call of Cancer. And today she helps people awaken to their own magnificence by embracing adversity as a catalyst for transformation. So, welcome to the 95 Exit Plan.
It's my pleasure to be here, Abraham.
Thanks for coming on the show once again. So, sorry I messed up your intro a little bit.
That's all right.
Thanks for that. And so, before we get to the main conversation, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
I've been involved in personal growth since I was in my 20s. I had this wonderful opportunity to find out a little bit more about myself and what made me tick. Well, it's been really a lifelong journey since then, and it's resulted in me, through all of what I've been through, becoming this Magnificence Mentor. First of all, mentoring myself because I needed to know how to do it, and then, of course, then doing what I can to mentor others.
I believe you're a really strong person, because most people they will break.
Yes.
So your journey has included experiences that would break many people. Looking back, what were some of the biggest lessons this difficult season taught you about yourself and life?
Wow, there's plenty of things that I learned along the way.
Yeah.
I guess probably the biggest lesson that I had to learn was once I began to understand who I was as a person. One of the biggest lessons I had to learn was how to love myself, because let's face it, when we're moving through life, we don't know a lot of things, and we don't have control over a lot of things.
Sure.
But we don't know that until we're in it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a tendency when we fail, which we inevitably do, to think, well, there's something wrong with me, that I'm not a good person, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not, whatever the case may be, I don't have enough experience or whatever, when really a lot of what's happening is we're failing forward, right? We try something, it may or may not work, and then maybe we persevere and try again because we want a good outcome.
Yeah.
Well, if we don't love ourselves at the outset and have high regard for ourselves, we can spend a lot of time hanging out in guilt and shame and all of the negative pieces and fall prey to behaviors or circumstances that are not ideal, and simply because we don't think we're worth anything.
You often speak about human magnificence. What does magnificence really mean? And why do so many people struggle to recognize it within themselves?
Well, the story that I don't know whether I've made up this story, but it seems to make sense to me
Yeah.
that when we were born, when we arrived on planet Earth, before we came here, of course, we were part of God in the universe, spirit, essence, whatever anybody wants to call that. And we were formless. And so coming into a human body is horrifically scary, first of all,
Mm,
and there's a tendency to we came deliberately forgetting that we were once all that there is, and because we wanted to experience life on planet Earth. Well, here we are in human form, right? Well, in human form, life is a big struggle, and so we didn't remember that we were magnificent. We didn't remember that we came in magnificent. And I think we deliberately forgot, because if we remembered all of that, what would life have to teach us on planet Earth? I think one of the challenges is, even though I think we're here to struggle, we're here to build resilience, we're here to test our mettle through a variety of circumstances, just like with steel. They temper steel by adding a great deal of heat to it, and then it smooths out and becomes its brilliant form, whatever that's meant to be. Well, the same thing with us as human beings. We're shaped into who we can be by some pressure applied, whether it's pressure from loved ones or pressure from circumstances or whatever. It tests us. And when we get past that or beyond that, which we inevitably do, I mean, we have a lot of successes in our lives that we don't tend to give ourselves credit for, because we're taught to focus on our where we fall down, our weaknesses, our failures, our whatever. Well, that's only a small piece of who we really are. When we think of magnificence, so the magnificence of the human is how infinitely creative we are to turn our minds to really anything. I mean, you look at the world as it exists. People are doing incredible things, and I'm forever astounded by the talents that I see, and what people produce, either in physical form or through the arts, or just in the way they can talk to other people or entertain other people or whatever. Wow, it's pretty fantastic. Well, where does that come from? Well, it comes from within. It's within the person. So our magnificence is right inside our heart space. And it's just at this point in time, I think in our human evolution, it's begging to come out. Wow, it was a pretty incredible journey, as you can imagine. The first thing that I fastened onto as a result of the near death experience, first of all, was the understanding that, and the knowing that came from this, was that we are all that there is. Like, we are this magnificence. And I felt it in the unconditional love that existed when I was on the other side. Well, I had always believed up to that point that as humans, we had to do something in order to measure up. We had to um, keep improving and keep being good people, and on and on and on, as if there was a book that judged, okay, yeah, you passed that test, like we do in school, right? And so, well, you're falling down here, but we'll give you a good point for that thing, and so on. Well, of course, I had some religious upbringing that taught me very clearly that Saint Peter was up there with his book of judgment, and so I better toe the line and do good works and look after people, and lots of times to my own detriment. And so I followed that path. Well, there I am in this heavenly realm. Well, there is no book. There's no judgment. And I didn't have to do anything of what I did to measure up. And I'm going, "What? Well, then what was the point?" And the visual was here, so if you can imagine the celestial banquet table that goes on into infinity with chairs all around the table and as much food as you could ever imagine and anything you could want on the table. Well, everybody, every human on planet Earth has a chair at that banquet table with their name on it. Well, what did they have to do to own that chair? Just exist. The fact that you're in human form means you have a chair at that banquet table. You didn't have to do anything for it. Well, that was a huge shock, quite honestly, and it changed how I viewed where I was at with my mission and my purpose in life because I had always when I mentioned earlier that personal growth was I started early with personal growth in my 20s, and it was very important to me. Well, I eventually began teaching personal growth because it became such a guiding force for me. But in the back of it was this, well, I'm doing good things for other people, so that's gonna help me measure up, and maybe just one more thing that I add to that will help me measure up. Well, I already measured up. So then when I come back to planet Earth, wow, I'm going, "Oh dear, now what?" Because everything I believed was important wasn't important anymore, and so I had to find out what really mattered to me and then do that. Well, I was already on track because I was doing, some of what I love to do, but I didn't know I just had to take out the having to measure up part of it right out of there and say, "Well, Sue, why are you doing this?" "Well, because it matters to me." And if it matters to me, then probably it will matter to the universe, even though the universe doesn't really care because you have free will. You get to do what you choose, and you just need to accept the consequences of your choices. Well, I've had a few choices over the years where I wasn't that happy with the consequences. And so I said, okay, I'm not doing that again. An Anyway, and then, of course, as I'm mulling this over and kind of distressed and angry about being back on planet Earth, because 'cause I'll tell you, the other side is pretty fine, and well, then I get the cancer diagnosis, and I'm going, "What?" So well, what I knew going into the cancer diagnosis that I wasn't afraid to die because being on the other side in fact, there were times when I said, "Okay, take me now because this is too hard." However, I'm in it, right? And I'm as terrorized as anybody else is facing cancer. However, in the back of my mind was this abiding idea that this is a part of my story, and if I'm meant to get through it, I didn't know if it was gonna take me home and or if it or if I was gonna live to see a better day. I had no real clue, but I was determined that I was going to live as if I was going to live. And that determination got me through all the worst of it to the other side. And then it was, "Okay, now what?" And so this gradually over time, as I was healing, this idea of magnificence resurfaced, and I began exploring that more and more and shifted my focus to a specific direction of personal growth, which was, well, what if we believed and understood and embraced the idea that we start magnificent? Well, if you believed you were all that you could possibly envision already, what would you do with that? That's a very tough position for everybody when we face some kind of hardship or adversity. I think the first thing to remember is that while you may not be able to control what's in front of you, or you couldn't control that it happened in the first place, to remember that, first of all, you are more powerful than any adversity or hardship that you'll come across. And knowing that, or at least grabbing onto that as a possibility, can help you through the next part of that. Now, why do I say that you are stronger than any adversity? Well, first of all, because you have built-in power tools that can get you through, and they aren't, tools in the sense necessarily in the sense that you grab hold of them with your hands, but think about determination as one of the power tools that you have. Well, every one of us has some level of determination. We had to be we had to be determined to learn how to walk, to learn how to, to speak, to well, if you track backwards, and this is a good exercise for anybody who's faced with adversity and thinking, "Oh, I'm really struggling, and I feel like a failure right now, and I feel as if I'm never gonna get through this." Start thinking about all the successes you have already had in your own life. I mean, just getting out of bed in the morning is a success. So, it's all those little things that add up and add up and add up that we realize, "Whoa, I'm stronger than I thought." So that's probably the first part of it. So, there's 4 power tools that I say to people. I'm sure there's way more than, but I tend to concentrate on these 4. So, determination is the first one. Then and they're all important, so I'm not putting them in any order of importance. Then courage would be another one. Well, if we look at the dictionary definition of courage, it's just simply an accumulation of small acts of bravery. So every time you were brave in the face of fear, maybe there was somebody bullying you on the playground, and somehow you got through that and overcame it. Well, you this was brave. You spoke up maybe, or went for help or whatever. Well, every act of bravery accumulates into this lovely vat of courage, and so we have that courage that we can rely on. And of course, the beauty of being surrounded by other humans is sometimes we need more courage, and so we borrow theirs. And fair game, everybody's willing to say, "Well, lean on me until you're feeling stronger." And so courage is a big part of that, and we all have it. The next one would be faith. And now it doesn't matter, if you have a spiritual faith or a religious faith, then obviously there's a strength in that that can see you through the worst of the worst. Even if you don't have a particular, spiritual or religious faith, your faith in yourself and the faith of others can see you through. I remember, reading about a fellow who had a very virulent form of pancreatic cancer, and he confessed that, he didn't have a lot of his own religious faith, but his wife did, and she kept saying to him, "You're gonna be okay, you're gonna be okay," and so he said, "I just I just believed what she said." And it was so interesting because normally pancreatic cancer can take you out in 6 months to a year. Well, he lasted over 12 years. And so you go, "Yeah." So so there's what faith can do, right? Yeah, the last one that I'll mention is hope. So that optimism, that sense of there's gonna be a better day. We hope for a better outcome, or a resolution, or something that will take us from wherever we are. Even just, "Well, I hope I can get through this." Well, just the very fact that you voice that and you have that in your mind as I'm gonna keep thinking about that it's gonna be better, and it's gonna get easier, and we're gonna finish with this, then eventually, yeah, it comes about. So those 4 power tools are very, helpful when we think about that, because every time you act on one of those, it can build your resilience, and every time you get through something that you were pretty sure at the start you were never gonna make it through, well, there you are. Yes, me too. There's lots of steps, and they're not difficult steps. It takes a little, persistence, I guess, and it starts with, first of all, a mindset. So because the bottom line is the only thing we really have control over is what we think. And so our mindset is vitally important. So we want to start checking our minds and saying, "Well, what am I thinking about right now?" Well, if my mindset is centered on, and there's that, they've talked about it as the monkey mind, where your thoughts are going in 100 different directions, and 98 of those directions are all negative. Well, that was my definition of hell on earth, right? So, but if we start paying attention to, well, what are my thoughts exactly? And is that serving me? Is it helping me get where I wanna go? Well, there was a period of time when when I realized that so many of the voices going on in my head were all saying negative things that I didn't really believe anyway and weren't helping me, I started turning off those voices and saying to them, "Look, I don't know who you are, but you don't have a say. And so be quiet. Go sit in the corner and don't bother me anymore." Well, and then and in order to do that, it meant I needed to shift my attention. Well, what do I want to think about instead? So gratitude is one thing that can quickly shift you out of the negative and into the positive. Well, what are you grateful for? Well, make a list in 5 minutes. Think of as many things as you can that you're grateful for. Well, it could be, well, it's a sunny day out there. I managed to get my coffee before I went to work. Somebody smiled at me on the bus. Doesn't matter what it is. What are you grateful for? And then I found for me that my attitude shifted right away. I could go from the depths of the doldrums right through to, "Oh, I feel quite happy right now." Well, happy to me is heaven on earth. And so we're the creators of that, and that's what needs to happen is we need to, it instead of having that scattered mind. They sometimes they label it the monkey mind. You know how they fly from tree to tree and flit around and cause all kinds of mischief. Well, that's exactly what can happen if it's like a monkey in our minds, that it won't leave us alone unless we say, "No, no, 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 we need better training than that." And so we focus. So it's the focus. Well, if I'm wanting to shift into something more positive, well, then it's that shift. You can't just say, "Well, I want to clear my mind," because the mind doesn't like a vacuum as such. It wants something to focus on. Well, give it something better to focus on. If your heart is set on moving in an entrepreneurial direction, then it's so important that you focus on really where your heart wants to lead you. Like, pay attention to what you most desire in your heart of hearts, because that's where no amount of thinking the thinking comes after that. But it really, from an entrepreneurial perspective, it's what what do I want to create in the world? What's really, really important to me? For some people, it could be the best cookie in the world. For others, it could be world peace. I mean, there's so many possibilities there. Well, each individual needs to decide, like, what is it that compels me, that I yearn for, that I hunger for? And then when that comes to mind, then it's to explore all the facets of that. And then the thinking comes after that. Well, of course, as part of that, when you focus on your heart's desire, you also need to remember that you're bringing magnificent you to the table. So it's very much like, do you love yourself enough to bring into being this vision that you have for yourself? And that's a big part of that. Make sure that you're bringing yourself into the equation, and And when you have that coherence, I guess, between who you believe you are and what you believe you're here to do, I think we're here to give. We're not necessarily here on planet Earth to get. We're here to give. What is it that you most want to give? What is your contribution? Because everybody has their own special way of doing that. Would I change anything? Oh, good question. Well, I guess the only thing I might have changed is my I might have changed loving myself to make it sooner. It seemed as if it took a long, long time for me to pay attention to that. And so if I was coaching my younger self, I'd be saying, "Sue, you need to really love yourself and get on that program right now." Because I think that would have helped me not be quite so scared of where I was going and, because we can't know what's going to be coming down the road towards us. But if I had had someone to reassure me and say, "Sue, you absolutely are all that you need to be," then I guess that could have changed a lot of the I think I wouldn't have suffered as much as I did. My magnificent ones, this is the journey. Moving from fear to self love, from doubt to inner peace, from hiding to shining. One episode, one conversation, one insight at a time. If you're keen for more, the Magnify with Sue newsletter is a tool you'll love. Week after week, we do this work together. Not as a one-off, not as a nice idea, as a real practice of discovering and embracing the magnificence that you already are. To sign up for this newsletter, join us at magnifywithsue.com.